My name is Emily Carter. I'm 21 years old, and last Sunday my grandfather raised his glass at dinner and toasted to my so-called brand new car. The problem is simple, almost laughable, if it weren't so painful. I don't own a car. I have never owned a car. Every single night I drag myself out of the diner where I work the late shift, clutch my purse like a shield, and climb onto the 11:15 city bus. That bus is my reality. It rattles through dark streets full of strangers I don't dare make eye contact with, and it carries me back to the tiny room I rent on the edge of town. My grandfather believed I was driving myself home in comfort and safety. The truth was much harsher, and the moment his words filled the dining room, my heart clenched in panic. For months, my life has been one long loop of exhaustion. From 9 to 3, I answer phones and file paperwork at a dental office that can barely keep its doors open. At 4, I trade the stale smell of fluoride for the greasy haze of a diner kitchen, balancing plates of burgers and pie until nearly midnight. 16-hour days. My shoes smell like coffee, my shoulders ache from carrying trays, and my savings account grows in tiny increments. $5 here, $7 there, whenever tips are kind. I keep telling myself it's all worth it because I'm running towards something, a used car. Not a shiny new model, not a luxury, just something reliable enough to carry me home without fear. But the finish line keeps moving farther away. Every time I think I'm a little closer, the ground shifts beneath me, and the person shifting it is my mother, Diane. She has perfected the art of sounding desperate at exactly the right moment. A late-night call about an electric bill, a tearful story about a broken water heater. Each plea lands like a hook in my chest, twisting guilt into obedience. I tell myself, she needs me. I tell myself I'll make up the lost savings later, but later never comes. My car fund shrinks, my fear grows, and my dreams stay just out of reach. The irony is that my grandfather, Walter, has always been the one person who makes me feel seen. He calls me the Carter work ethic and tells me I remind him of himself as a young man. His love is simple, his praise genuine. So when he raised that glass last Sunday and said, "To Emily and her first car," I should have felt celebrated. Instead, my stomach dropped. He looked at me with so much pride, like he knew a secret I didn't. And then he smiled, leaned toward me across the table, and added words that made my pulse thunder in my ears. "I know you'll love it," he said. In that moment, I couldn't breathe. What did he mean? What car? I was still living in bus schedules and fear. Yet the way he looked at me, beaming, certain, expectant, told me that something far bigger than I understood was about to unravel right there in my mother's dining room. I'd love to know how far this story can travel across the world. Share where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Honestly, just one subscription from you can keep me motivated all day to create more stories like this. Because what I'm about to share isn't just about a car. It's about the weight of silence, the price of loyalty, and the way a single sentence can split a family wide open. Just a week before that dinner, I was sitting on my narrow twin bed, peeling off my diner uniform and counting my tips. $85. My fingers smelled like onion rings and burnt coffee, but I felt a spark of pride. 85 meant I could add something to my envelope marked car fund. I smoothed the crumpled bills, ready to tuck them away, when my phone buzzed. Mom, midnight. My chest tightened. "Emily, honey," Diane began, her voice shaky and low. "I hate to ask, but the electric bill came today. It's a catastrophe. $190. I don't know how we'll make it this month." She sighed so heavily I could picture her, lights turned off, sitting in the dark to save pennies. "Don't worry about me, sweetie. I'll just eat less." It was a performance I knew too well. Guilt coiled in my stomach like a fist. I looked at the $85 on my blanket. 8 hours of fake smiles and slam dishes. My dream slipped further away with each ring of her voice. I whispered, "It's okay, Mom. I'll send you what I made tonight." She brightened instantly. "You're a lifesaver, Emily. My angel, my angel." I swallowed bitterness and opened my banking app. The next afternoon, I stopped by her apartment to drop off groceries. She answered the door wearing a brand new silver necklace that caught the light. My eyes lingered for half a second too long, but I said nothing. Controversial, maybe even foolish. I could have asked, "How did you afford that?" But I didn't. I was too tired for another fight, too conditioned to carry her burdens without question. Meanwhile, far across town, my grandfather was unknowingly fueling the same illusion. He hated the thought of me standing alone at a bus stop. Months earlier, he decided to send Diane an extra $250 each month. For Emily's car fund, he wrote carefully in the memo line of each check. "Don't tell her it's from me. She's proud. Just keep it safe for her." He believed he was protecting me. He believed Diane was trustworthy. So 2 rivers of money flowed into the same black hole, my tips and his checks. Both carried my name. Neither reached me. And neither of us knew we were being played. By Sunday, I was so drained that I barely had the energy to change into a clean blouse before heading to dinner. My stomach churned with dread, not hunger. I told myself it was just another routine evening of pot roast and polite lies. I had no idea the mask was about to slip. I had no idea that by the time dessert was served, my world would be cracked wide open. Sunday dinners at my mother's apartment always felt like theater. She laid out her best china, folded the napkins like a restaurant, and floated around the table as if she were auditioning for some grand role. The devoted mother, the struggling provider, the heart of the family. That night was no different. The smell of roast beef drifted through the air, rich and heavy. A silk scarf I had never seen before draped around her neck, gleaming under the chandelier. Yet as she carved slices of meat onto plates, she sighed about how expensive beef had become. I nodded politely, biting back the words on my tongue. My shoes still bore the sticky grime of the diner. My arms ached from carrying trays, and all I could think about was the $85 I had transferred to her account days earlier. But I didn't argue. I never argued. I sat there, quietly absorbing the performance. Grandpa Walter, bless his heart, sat at the head of the table, eyes twinkling as he watched the show. To him, it wasn't theater, it was family. He chuckled at her jokes, complimented the roast, and shook his head in mock disbelief. "I don't know how you do it all, Diane. Working so hard, keeping this place so lovely. You're a wonder," Diane smiled modestly, tilting her head just so. I knew that smile. It was the mask that hid everything. Then his eyes landed on me. They softened, filling with a pride that made my throat tighten. "And you, Emily," he said warmly, "your mother tells me you're working double shifts, saving up. That's the Carter work ethic. That's what makes me proud." His words should have been a balm, but instead they sliced, because I knew the truth. My savings were a joke. Every step forward had been dragged backward by my mother's needs. But then, just as I tried to swallow my shame, Grandpa's face brightened. He tapped his spoon gently against his glass. The sound rang clear, commanding attention. Diane leaned forward, beaming as if she knew what was coming. I froze. He rose slowly, steadying himself with one hand on the table, and lifted his glass high. "To Emily," he declared, his voice rich with joy, "to her strength, her independence, and her brand new car. I am so proud that the family fund we've all built together finally helped her cross the finish line." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. A car? Family fund? My brain scrambled, desperate to make sense of his words. He was looking at me, eyes glowing, waiting for me to confirm. My mother's smile stretched wide, a little too wide, like porcelain about to crack. My lips parted, dry and trembling. The truth tumbled out, simple, unpolished, devastating. "Car? What car?" I whispered, and just like that, Diane's smile froze. The silence after my question was deafening. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the faint hum of the chandelier. My grandfather blinked, confused. My mother's face stiffened, her fork suspended midair. I forced myself to breathe. "Grandpa?" I said softly. "I don't have a car." I still take the 11:15 bus home from the diner every night. My voice shook, but once the words began, they couldn't be stopped. My savings are low because I've been helping Mom. Last week I gave her my tips for that plumbing bill. The words landed like stones in a still pond. Diane's hand trembled violently. The fork slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the porcelain plate with a sharp metallic ring. It was the sound of a mask shattering. Her face drained of color, panic flooding her eyes. Grandpa turned his gaze from me to her, back and forth, as though trying to stitch two realities together. His brows furrowed. "Emily," he said slowly, "you take the bus every night? And you've been giving your tips to help your mother with bills?" "Yes, Grandpa." My throat ached as I said it aloud. The exhaustion of months pressed down on me, but at least it was honest. A muscle in his jaw tightened. He leaned back, his eyes narrowing as a new picture formed in his mind. He remembered the checks, 10 of them, each marked carefully in his own handwriting. Emily's car fund, $250 every month. He had imagined them piling up, waiting to be combined with my own savings. He had pictured me behind the wheel, safe and proud. But now he understood. The checks never reached me. The money never reached me. Instead, his generosity and my sacrifice had both been funneled into the same void, my mother's pocket. Diane's hands shook as she reached for her napkin, dabbing her lips to buy time. Her eyes begged me silently, "Lie. Pretend. Save me." But I had no lie to give. I had only the truth. The air grew colder, sharper. Grandpa's face hardened, the warmth draining from his features. He pressed his palms against the table, his voice low, dangerous. "Diane," he said, each syllable clipped like a blade. "Where is the money?" The question hung in the air, heavy as judgment. My mother flinched as though struck, and I knew in that moment that the game she had played for years was over. My mother opened her mouth, but only a thin, breathless sound came out at first. Finally, she whispered, "I was saving it for her. In a special account." I wanted to wait until the interest built up. Until the right time, her words tumbled over each other, thin and flimsy, collapsing before they even left her lips. I stared at her, stunned. A special account? Interest? The right time? My chest burned. I thought of the scarf wrapped around her neck, silk glimmering under the light. My throat tightened. Against every instinct to stay quiet, the words burst out. "That scarf, Mom. I saw it in the mall window last week. $300, more than I make in a week. Don't tell me you were saving for me while you walked out wearing that." Her eyes flashed with anger, then desperation. "Emily, don't embarrass me," she hissed. The room tilted, thick with tension. Grandpa's face darkened. "The right time?" he thundered suddenly, slamming his hand on the table so hard the glasses rattled. His voice rose, powerful and fierce in a way I had never heard before. The right time was every night she stood alone at a bus stop in the dark. The right time was every single day she worked herself to the bone and still handed you her tips because she thought you were drowning. And all the while you were stealing from her, stealing from me. Diane shrank back, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, gasping for air. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were too late, too shallow. The mask was gone. The truth lay bare. My grandfather pushed back his chair with a screech, rising to his full height. His shoulders shook, but his voice was steady as stone. He turned to me, eyes blazing with sorrow and resolve. "Emily," he said firmly, "we're leaving." Now the room was silent except for the pounding of my heart. I rose slowly, legs trembling, and felt his hand, strong and certain, on my shoulder. We walked toward the door, leaving behind the glittering plates, the untouched pie, and the woman who had built her kingdom of lies on our backs. And as the door clicked shut behind us, I knew one chapter of my life had ended. Another, more honest, more terrifying, more liberating, had just begun. I woke up Monday to a phone that wouldn't stop vibrating on my nightstand. 10 missed calls, 12, then 22. Diane's name filled the screen like sirens. At first, the voicemails were furious. How dare I humiliate her? How could I turn my grandfather against his own daughter? When I didn't answer, her tone flipped, soft and syrupy, promising explanations that never came, apologies that said nothing, 1,000 reasons why I should come back to the table and put the pieces of her broken performance together again. I stared at the wall while they played, the sun creeping up over the cheap blinds, painting the room in thin gold lines. Finally, I held down the button and blocked her number. The silence that followed felt both wrong and right, like stepping onto solid ground after years at sea. Some people will say blocking your own mother is cruel. Maybe they're right, but cruelty wears many costumes. In my world, it was a soft voice at midnight asking for my future one small bill at a time. That afternoon, Grandpa called. His voice was steady, but I could hear the fatigue in it, the kind that comes from realizing the person you raised has used your kindness as an ATM with no receipt. "Emily," he said, "I've made some changes. I've canceled the extra checks to your mother. Every dollar meant for you will go to you directly from now on. No middleman. No confusion." He paused. I should have done it that way from the start. I sank onto the edge of my bed, a laugh and a sob tangling in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered. 2 words that didn't even begin to cover the relief flooding my chest. He cleared his throat. "Get your shoes on." "I'm picking you up." We drove in comfortable quiet to a large used car lot off the highway, the kind with rows of sensible sedans and SUVs gleaming in the early afternoon sun. No balloons, no nonsense. "A brand new car loses value the second it hits the road," he said as we walked past a lineup of over-polished dreams. "We're buying reliability, not theater." A salesman in a too bright tie approached, all smiles, all teeth. I braced for the script. Monthly payment games, add-ons I didn't need, the polite doubt in his eyes when a young woman says she wants something practical, not pretty. "We want a certified hatchback," Grandpa said before the man could speak. 2 to 4 years old, low mileage, clean history. My granddaughter drives late at night. Safety and reliability are not negotiable." The salesman blinked, recalibrated, and led us to a silver hatchback that looked like it had nothing to prove. The seats were firm but forgiving. The cabin was simple, honest, no flashy screens demanding attention. I turned the key. The engine hummed like a promise. "Take it around the block," Grandpa said. I pulled onto the frontage road with both hands tight at 10 and 2. The car moved like it wanted to help. No rattles, no arguments. For the first time in months, I could picture a life that didn't end at a bus stop in the dark. I could picture a door locking with a solid click, a heater that worked on command, my body going home without bargaining. Back at the lot, the salesman spread papers across a metal desk in a small office that smelled like toner and old coffee. "Here's the breakdown," he said, tapping figures. "Price, taxes and fees, certified warranty. With your credit and income, we can structure a reasonable payment. The down payment will determine the monthly." I opened my wallet, felt the familiar hollowness. "I have a starter," Grandpa said quietly, sliding an envelope across the desk. I knew those hands, scarred from decades of pipe fitting, steady as bridges. Inside the envelope was a cashier's check. My breath caught. "Grandpa, this is $3,200, he said, not meeting my eyes. "It's from my savings." "Before you argue, listen to me. This is not a rescue. This is a correction. I sent 10 months of $250 to your mother, thinking it was a bridge to your independence. The bridge never reached you. This makes a start on the gap." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were a deep, relentless blue. "You are the one building your future. I'm just putting the lumber where it belongs." The salesman excused himself to copy documents. I stared at the envelope, bleary with gratitude and grief. "I don't want you to think I can't stand on my own," I said. "I don't," he replied. "I think your mother cut your legs out from under you and told you to run. Now we give you back the ground. We reviewed the terms together. No balloon payments, fixed rate, no worthless add-ons. Grandpa read every line like it was a contract for the moon. When the salesman returned, he tapped the final page and slid a pen toward me. "Sign here, Miss Carter, and the car is yours." My hand hovered. Somewhere far away I could hear the rattle of the 11:15 bus, the hiss of its brakes, the soft warning of its doors closing. Somewhere closer, I could hear my mother's voice, all velvet and vinegar, asking for one last transfer, one more sacrifice for the family good. My chest tightened, my palms dampened. I looked at the name typed neatly on the line. Emily Carter. Not Diane, not family fund. Me. "Emily," Grandpa said, voice low, steady. "You sign because your future belongs to you." I took the pen. The room seemed to shrink to the length of that signature line. I pressed the tip to the paper and the office door banged open. A sharp, familiar voice cut the air like broken glass. "Emily!" it snapped. I turned. Diane stood there, breathless, eyes wild as if she had sprinted the whole way from a lie to a truth she could not control. Somehow, she had found us. The salesman froze. Grandpa stepped forward, shoulders squared. Diane pointed at the papers with a trembling hand. "You can't do this," she hissed. "You can't cut me out." Her eyes flicked to the envelope, hungry, frantic. "That money is family money." The pen was still in my fingers. The signature line still waited. "Miss Carter," the salesman said carefully, looking at me, not at her. "Do you want to proceed?" I looked at the door, at the desk, at the name on the page. The world narrowed to a single decision. The tip of the pen hovered. Then, right as it touched paper, Diane whispered the oldest threat in our house. "You'll regret choosing him over me." The ink bled a tiny dot. I pressed down. The first night I drove myself home, the streets felt different, like someone had turned down the volume on danger. I left the diner at 11:03, waved to Gary mopping the tiles, and walked into the cool air without checking a bus schedule, without bracing for the hiss of doors or the stare of strangers who never blinked. I unlocked the silver hatchback and slid into a seat that knew my shape already. When the engine caught, it was gentle, confident. I pulled out with the radio off because I wanted to hear what freedom sounded like. It sounded like the tires whispering over asphalt, like the quiet that sits down beside you and doesn't ask for anything. At a red light, my phone buzzed with a new number, unknown. I let it ring, then another with the same area code as Diane's apartment. I exhaled and said it aloud just to taste the truth. "I'm not her wallet anymore." The words steadied my hands on the wheel. People will argue about that sentence, about its cruelty, its clarity. I know. But there is a point where kindness to someone who feeds on it is cruelty to yourself. The next morning, I walked into the dental office with a kind of bright, exhausted bravery I hadn't felt in a year. The office manager, Sandra, looked up over her glasses. "You're in early." "I can be," I said. "Every day. I have wheels." Her eyebrow arched. Impressed, not skeptical, it felt like a tiny reshaping of the world. She leaned back in her chair. "We've been juggling the schedule. If you can take the 7:30 a.m. opening calls and show up on time, I can bump you to full-time with benefits in 2 months. And there's a small raise now. It's not glamorous. It's honest," I said, and meant it with my whole body. At lunch, I texted Grandpa a photo of my key fob with a little silver tag that read 24/7 roadside assistance. He sent back a picture of his old thermos and a thumbs-up emoji, which made me laugh on a day that might have otherwise been too heavy to carry. He asked about the drive, the brakes, the steering. He did not ask about Diane. I was grateful for both the concern and the omission. By evening, the noise started creeping in from the edges. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in months sent a paragraph about honoring your mother, the kind of moral math that never shows the receipts. An aunt said her group chat was confused and wanted my side, as if the truth had not rung off a porcelain plate in a quiet dining room like a struck bell. I answered none of it. I drove to work, parked under a streetlight, and counted the steps from the car to the back door. 12. 12 steps of private safety that used to belong to city transit and chance. During the lull between the dinner rush and the late crowd, my phone buzzed again, a number I recognized from HR at the diner. "Emily," the manager said, "we saw your availability update. You can take early morning prep on weekends? That frees up a higher hourly slot for you. We can also talk supervisor training next month if you want it. People show up when they can get here. Folks with cars get promoted because they can cover." I pressed the phone to my shoulder while I refilled ketchup bottles. "Yes," I said, smiling despite the vinegar on my hands. "I can get there." It wasn't the kind of plot twist a movie would bother to capture. No music swelling, no confetti, but it was the kind that remakes a life. A schedule that bends toward you instead of breaking you. A manager who trusts you because you can promise arrival and deliver it. Around midnight, after my shift, I sat in the car and stared at my call log. The blocked list was a cemetery of old habits. The unknown numbers were fresh flowers left by a familiar ghost. I hovered over change number in settings. The thought of wiping out the past with one digital cut felt both reckless and clean. Would it make me safer? Maybe. Would it make me lonelier? Possibly. Would it make me free? I didn't know yet. I closed the screen. Not tonight. Sometimes liberation is learning you can make a choice, and choosing not to until you can trust yourself to pick for you, not against someone else. I drove home under a sky that looked scrubbed. The city kept its secrets. So did I. The hatchback clicked shut behind me and the lock sank home with a gentle thunk that sounded like a promise kept. I brushed my teeth, washed the diner off my skin, and stood by the window for a long time, listening for the bus I no longer needed. It passed in the distance like an old story moving on without me. The next day was a double. Dental office at dawn, diner at dusk. I made it to both with minutes to spare and energy left to look people in the eye. At closing, Gary tossed me the rag and said, "You're different." I wiped the counter and laughed. "I'm horizontal now," I said. "All this time I was vertical, leaning against the wind." He didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded like he knew. Back at the apartment building, I parked under the same streetlight as always. 12 steps to the door. The night was warm enough that the trees were still busy gossiping with the breeze. I grabbed my bag and looked up at the windows, the stairwell light glowing a tired yellow. That's when I heard it. My name, hurled into the darkness like a plate. "Emily." The voice cracked open the quiet. I froze. A shadow detached itself from the bushes near the entrance and stepped into the cone of light. Silver flashed at a throat I knew too well. Diane. She'd found a way around the wall I built. Not through the phone this time, but through the world. Her hair was wind-wild, her expression raw, not staged. "You ruined me," she said, voice low and shaking. "You made him choose. You made him see I didn't move. My keys were between my fingers. Old habit, new life." She took a step closer. The air tightened. "Open the door," she demanded. "We are going to talk." I stood there, heart kicking hard, car cooling behind me, the streetlight pouring judgment over everything I used to call love. 12 steps to safety. 2 people who shared a history, one truth I could not unlearn. "Emily," she said again, softer now, more dangerous for it. "Let me in." I reached for the doorknob and kept my eyes on hers. I didn't open the door that night. I stood with my hand on the knob, my mother's eyes burning into mine, and I realized something simple but final. I was no longer required to step back into her storm. I turned the key, slipped inside alone, and locked the bolt. On the other side, she pounded once, then twice, before her footsteps faded into the dark. For the first time in years, silence was mine to keep. The days that followed felt like a slow uncoiling of chains. Grandpa and I built a new rhythm, coffee on Saturday mornings, long talks about his years in the union, practical lessons about money he wished someone had taught him earlier. He never asked me to forgive Diane. He never pushed me to reconcile. He only reminded me gently that love without respect is not love at all. Family, he said one morning, stirring sugar into his cup, is not who you owe. It's who you can trust. With the car came choices I had never been allowed before. I could take early shifts. I could drive myself safely home. I could say no without fearing how I'd get to work the next day. Each decision, no matter how small, stitched a little more freedom into the fabric of my life. I realized my vindication was never about Diane's punishment. It was about reclaiming the ordinary dignity she had stolen: safety, independence, the right to dream without permission. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the echo of her voice. The guilt she used to summon like a magician's trick lingers in my bones. But then I grab my keys, step into my car, and remind myself I am not her wallet, not her alibi, not her stage prop. I am Emily Carter, and I am finally driving my own life forward. The greatest theft wasn't the money. It was the trust broken, the love manipulated. And the greatest gift wasn't the check Grandpa slid across the desk. It was the truth, spoken out loud in that dining room, that tore away every mask. Truth was messy. Truth was costly. But truth was the only thing strong enough to build a future on. So here's the lesson I carry. Love that demands silence is not love. Help that hides behind lies is not help. We don't owe loyalty to the people who break us just because they share our blood. What we owe ourselves is the chance to live with honesty, to draw boundaries, to heal in peace. And now I want to leave you with a thought. If someone you love asked you to lie for them, would you do it? Or would you let the silence shatter and set yourself free? Think about it and let me know. Because sometimes the bravest revenge is simply choosing to walk away and build something better.